A lot of people view Sonic Labyrinth to be the worst Sonic game ever released. I don't entirely agree with that because 3D Sonic games have a lot more that they can screw up, because there's the camera and 3 dimensions in movement, and not just 2. But Sonic Labyrinth comes really close. This is the Sonic 06 of the classic era. I want to stress, I don't hate it because it's slow. I mean, that certainly doesn't help, but it's not the only reason that's a terrible game. If it was released on its own, as a non-Sonic title, it would still be a terrible game. It's not terrible because the speed is too slow. It's terrible because the controls are atrocious. You see, the reason that the game is so awful is because you are extremely stiff when you're moving around, no matter how you're moving around. When you're walking, you move really slowly, but you spin dash really quickly. And you might think, well, the spin dash is fine. Here's the problem. First of all, spin dash into a wall, and you start bouncing everywhere, uncontrollably. Why can't you just stop when you hit a wall? I can understand being allowed to bounce off the walls in the bosses, because that makes it easier to defeat them, because you're constantly bouncing off the wall and towards the boss. But why make all of the walls bounceable? If you press A while you're spin dashing, you'll skid to a stop, but you don't stop instantly. Why? Because it's unrealistic? What kind of a game are you playing? I don't care about realistic physics if it makes it so that the game isn't as fun. You don't skid instantly to a stop in this game. The game somehow manages to combine stiff controls with extremely slippery ones. When you kill the enemies, they respawn. And I don't mean leaving the room respawns them. I mean just walking a few feet to the right. So it feels like, okay, I want to kill off all these enemies so that they don't pose a threat anymore. But oh wait, I kill them and then I leave the room and then they're back again. Well, what was the point of that? And the reason that you really don't want to get hit by enemies is because you have 3 keys to collect in every level. And if you get hit, the keys will scatter. And you might think, well, that's not as bad as in 3D Blast because at least the keys don't fly all over the place. At least they actually stay where they are. Yeah, unless you take too long picking them up. If you don't pick them up fast enough, they'll disappear and they'll reappear back where you last got them, which can be extremely tedious in levels where you have to go all over the place to find the keys, and sometimes have to memorize exactly how to get them. Why can't they just stay where they are? Why do they have to disappear? Why does any item in any video game have to disappear if you don't pick them up fast enough? That's stupid. Why can't you just deposit a key? Like you did with the flickies in 3D Blast, where you go to a goal ring and just deposited them. In this game, you get hit and your keys scatter, and you gotta pick them up fast. But one, you walk really slowly, so if you try to be walking around to be careful enough so that you don't miss them, then you'll probably feel like you're gonna run out of time. And you probably won't, but you have so much time pressure that you have a really powerful urge to spin dash, and it's really easy to miss with a spin dash because it's so stiff. You spin dash and you're locked in one direction. You really don't have full analog movement or anything like it in this game, despite the fact that it's an isometric game, and you really feel like you should have some imitation at least of analog controls, but you don't. I mean, you can move in 8 directions, but you are still locked into one direction as soon as you start moving that way. There's just so many things that enrage me about this game. Why is it that when you pick up the invincibility item box, the background flashes constantly to the point where you could probably give people seizures? Why was that needed? Why can't you just have Sonic sparkle like he usually does when he collects an invincibility item? And the invincibility item, you may feel compelled to get it because you really don't want to get hit, but it doesn't last long enough to feel worth it. It doesn't last long enough to feel like it's worth hurting your eyes. What is it with the old Sonic games and causing eye strain? Another thing about the item boxes is that they don't look graphically like item boxes. They look like tiny arrows on the floor, and I feel like that's bad graphics when Normally I don't complain about graphics unless they negatively impact gameplay, and they do here because it takes a long time for you to register and memorize that, oh, these are item boxes, I should walk into them. Why can't they just look like item boxes normally do? And not only that, but you can't tell what item you're going to get until you get it, so it's easy to get disappointed. And this is a minor nitpick, I know, but why do you have to go into a specific bonus door to get to a bonus stage? Why can't you just get the bonus stage automatically after you beat the level? Why can't you just go through the gold door and get it that way? And I have no idea how you get that bonus stage. Why can't they either tell you how to access the bonus stage right from the get-go, or make it intuitive? Everything about this game irritates me. Why does your ring counter be invisible? The boss fights are complete bullshit, because it feels like it's so easy for them to hit you when they really shouldn't. I'm in ball for it. I shouldn't have gotten killed by that. You should be invincible when you're in ball for it, because Sonic is in a ball and he's constantly spinning around and his spines should attack anything that touches him. It's like putting your hand in a spinning fan. It shouldn't hurt the fan. It feels like it's too easy for the bosses to kill you and hit you when they shouldn't. And when you get hit and you lose your rings, it's not like in every other Sonic game where they scatter away from you in a circle and it's easy to collect them. Although, it would still be hard to collect them even if they did scatter normally because you move so slow, and the spin dash sends you forward so fast and causes you to bounce around everywhere. Because the rings don't scatter so that it's easy for you to collect them, when you get hit by a boss, you just lose all your rings and you can't get them back. And luckily there's a few rings in the arena, but it's like you spend so long before a boss fight collecting rings. You'd think that they'd do the Sonic Blast thing, where you get hit and you don't lose all of your rings. They started that trend with Sonic Triple Trouble, so you'd think that they would continue it for this game. But no, it doesn't really matter that you go into the boss fight with like 50 rings. You could have 100 rings. Well, actually, you can't have 100 rings because it does exactly what Sonic 1 8-bit did, where you get 100 rings and it loops back to 0. You always get enough rings to get an extra life in the pre-boss sections, but it's only one extra life. And you're probably going to lose the extra life anyways right after you get killed by the boss. And even if you don't, that extra life still isn't really going to be helpful. Extra lives in general aren't that useful because you have 2 continues, at least by the point in the game that I got to, because I couldn't bother to beat this game. And this is the worst possible camera angle for this. I mean, really? Why can't it just show Sonic going south from your perspective, or right? It would make it a lot easier to judge how exactly you're supposed to move Sonic so that he keeps getting the lines of rings. You have to move left or right to collect the rings. But it feels like that's not what you're supposed to do because you're moving diagonally. So it feels like you should be moving diagonally to collect the rings, but that's not how it works. I got all the way to one specific level. I got a lot further than I expected. I thought maybe I'll try to beat the game and do a let's play of it. I couldn't get that far because I got to a part where the level had nothing but warp panels from Sabrina's gym in Pokemon. And I hate warp panels because you have to memorize where they take you. And it makes the level design needlessly confusing. Why can't I just go upstairs or walk into those black spring things or walk into those orange springs from the first level? And you have to ride on these red circular things in order to get across bottomless pits. There shouldn't be bottomless pits in a game like this. Not only because the controls are shit, and you're always going to be assuming that you're going to hit a wall that bounces you back and not fall off to the edge of the pit, but it's an isometric platformer. Because when are there bottomless pits in a game like that? Sonic 3D Blast didn't have that. It completely caught me off guard when I fell into the first pit in this game. Although, usually the bottomless pits are in intuitive areas, like areas where you have to ride those red circles. But I hate how the red circles are one way. They bring you to a place, and then they crumble, and you can't ride them back. It makes backtracking needlessly annoying, and you know, I probably would have beaten this game if it just kept up the way that the level design was going before, where it was it wasn't extremely tedious exploring the entire level. Here, you have to memorize how you get to every key and how you get to everywhere. And once you've finally found all the keys, you have to make sure that you don't get hit while you're going back to the goal. And sometimes it's hard to remember how exactly you're supposed to get back to the goal in the first place. It's like every level, well, it's not entirely true because every level does a pretty good job of distinguishing itself from each other, despite the very limited aesthetic differences. The music is pretty meh, although there's one song in it that I really like. There's a sad feeling to it, and for the most part does a pretty good job of giving a threatening feeling to it and stuff. It's surprisingly good. Most of the soundtrack is pretty meh and forgettable. And the graphics are very unimpressive. Like, I hate the eye strain, and I hate the fact that the item boxes don't look like item boxes. There's a lot of annoying gimmicks in the level, like the cannons. I hate how they can only fire you in 2 directions. Why can't they fire you in 4, at the very least? Well, at least I didn't really feel like I was not in control of where they sent me. They were better than the cannons from Carnival Night Zone, let's put it that way. The levels did a good job of distinguishing themselves from each other and making it feel like it wasn't repetitive. This probably would have been an enjoyable game if it weren't for the fact that the keys scatter from you and can disappear, and it can be tedious getting the keys, and most importantly, the controls are terrible. It's not because the game is slow and non-traditional for a Sonic game that it's a terrible game. It's because it controls like shit. That's why people hate it. Even if this wasn't called a Sonic game, it would still be a terrible game to play because the controls are the worst I've ever played in any video game. And granted, I haven't played that many bad games, but still, the bosses are tedious and will constantly make you die to them. The levels, well, the levels aren't horrible. It's the controls that make them horrible to play. This is a very frustrating game, and I'm surprised that I got as far as I did. If you want to appreciate Sonic 3D Blast in spite of its slippery controls, play this game, because you can't even jump in this game. And granted, it's hard to accurately jump and land on an enemy in isometric view because there's no depth perception, which is why I could never finish Super Mario RPG because platforming became impossible by Bowser's Castle. But, like, at least you can jump in Sonic 3D Blast. At least you can deposit your flickies so that you don't always have to worry about all of them scattering if you get hit. At least the flickies don't go back to where they were when you first found them. At least you move relatively fast. The plot of this game is, well, actually the plot is one of the highlights of the game. Like, Eggman puts slowdown shoes on Sonic when he's sleeping and then sneaks away after putting him in his labyrinth. Now, you might be thinking, well, why doesn't he just kill him while he's sleeping instead of putting him in a labyrinth that could kill him? Well, that's perfectly in character for Eggman. Eggman's always been an idiot. The plot is amusing enough. It's a good Sonic game plot, at least for the classic era anyways. It's just that there's no fun to be had in this game because of how frustrating it is. If the controls were solid, then it would be sort of fine. But because the controls are terrible, it's just too frustrating and unbearable. I tried to beat the game, but I just completely gave up on it because it was so unintuitive trying to go through that level, and I just hated the warp panels. I hated how you had so many different routes you could take to the beginning, and you didn't know which ones you could take to lead you to the key, and some of them can lead you to dead ends, so screw it. The enemies are annoying, boss fights are really cheap, Everything about this game is terrible, and there's a reason that so many people hate it. It's not the worst game ever, but it's close to it.